Hey, what's up guys? It's T.Mayne here. Thanks for being back on the channel. It's super awesome to have you guys back for another week of preparation. Now, today we're going to go into 6 different pairs, guys. One of them being the DXY. And I really want to just apologize for the length of this video, guys. In today's one, I want it to be just a little bit more detailed than I normally think I am. And the reason being is because I want you guys to actually go into or understand my thought processes and the real meat of how I'm trading. Because I'm looking at pairs. You'll see some pairs that are on my watch list that I'm not looking at, some pairs that I am looking at, and I guess it's also important to know why I would look at certain pairs and why I wouldn't look at certain pairs. You'll also get to see how I establish biases, also based off how other pairs are moving as well, because even the other pairs themselves, if there's some sort of a correlation, they give us information on where, for example, just the JPY on its own could be going based off the setups that we're seeing across multiple pairs. So let's get into it, guys. We're gonna get started with the DXY. On the DXY, I think we'll stick to the H4, but I'll just make references and just speak about higher time frame structure as well, because as much as we're gonna dive deep, I don't want to make this video too long. So guys, on the DXY, on the H4, let's get started. What we can already see is a market that has been trending to the downside, has violated this descending trend line to the upside, and then has found resistance at an area that the market has reacted from before. We've pushed away, we've come back, we've shown another reaction, and we've seen this market push to the downside, violating this H4 previous support structure, and as well as our daily lower structure that was holding to the upside. So we can see a market that we've basically seen a lot of downside momentum coming into most recently. So what we can talk about structure, or what I'd like to point out about structure, is that if we just hop up to the daily just for a second, just so that we can make things a little bit more clear, cut out the noise. Remember guys, the higher the time frame, the less noise we get. The lower the time frame, the more detail we have, or well, I'll use the same word, noise. The more detail we have, the more noise we have, and I guess the more easier it is for us to make those intraday decisions off those lower time frames. But higher time frames give us the confirmation and I guess the value in the price action that we're really looking for. We want to trade higher time frame structure. So looking at higher time frame structure on the daily, guys, we have this support structure over there that is obviously holding markets to the upside, or could potentially hold markets to the upside. So this is an important support area where we need to pay attention to, first of all, how does the market get to this area? Second of all, what does the market do when we're in this area? And once price gives us those two pieces of information, obviously those two pieces of information will give us the necessary data for us to be able to make that next trading decision. So looking at the DXY, we have an important support area, we have an important resistance area that we've seen a market react from before. Now going down to the H4, let's talk about the bias and the direction that we're looking to trade, the potential opportunities that the dollar might give us in the coming week. So guys, we have these previous support structures over there. I'll just mark them out with another horizontal box thing over there. Let's just do that. There we go. So we have those areas there. We also have the previous extreme lows that were violated to the downside, guys. So these are previous resistance areas that could be, or that could function as potential support. So what I would be looking for at this point would kind of be to trade in the direction of the momentum, to be looking for some downside continuation on the DXY. The zone that I'm looking for markets to really tap into, give me those probabilities, would be this support area that will now function as resistance. So if prices do pull up to these areas before actually tapping in to these lows over there, then I will be looking for some downside continuation. Otherwise, guys, our buying probabilities are going to start coming in once we reach this support structure over here. We need to watch to see, like I said, how do markets get to this area and what do markets do when they're in these areas here. Those are going to be the two pieces of information that will help us establish or maybe change our bias after markets have actually tapped into these support structures down there. So for now, guys, I'm going to be looking for some downside continuation. Hopefully markets don't tap into these areas first before we see them pull to the upside. I want to see market actually come up first and then make that move to the downside, because then I will still have it in my mind that this area hasn't been tapped yet and prices are probably going to want to go and tap into those areas before any further upside. So hoping to trade the momentum on the DXY, hoping to look for some downside continuation. Let's go on to Aussie CAD, guys. So on Aussie CAD, just by the way, sorry I didn't mention the pairs that we're going to be trading, guys. My apologies. DXY, Aussie CAD, Aussie Swiss franc, Aussie yen, NZDCAD, and my network went out. We'll wait for it. There we go. NZDJPY, and that's about it, guys. So those are the 6 pairs that we're gonna go into. My apologies. Let's get back to Aussie CAD. So on Aussie CAD, guys, what we can see is a market that has violated some structural lows. We see a violation of these previous lows over here. We see a violation of these extreme lows over there. And also, if we look back in the past where we see this horizontal ray coming from, we have lows that have been established over there that were the cause of, or where we basically saw a lot of buyers coming in, sending prices to the upside. From these areas here, those lows have been taken out to the downside. Very, I guess, very small push below those lows, but nonetheless it's still a violation of those lows, and the market still has created a lower low. So we've definitely seen basically prices breaking down and poking below structure and then breaking back above structure. Now what can we see about the most recent price action? If you just look at the structure, we have a push to the downside, low established, high established there, and ever since we had that low and that high established, prices haven't really pushed away from these 2 levels of structure. So we do know that these are important levels of structure. Price still hasn't managed to close above these previous structural highs over there. So on Aussie CAD, we can assume that Aussie CAD is basically in a range. Where prices are right now, we are in a range. So we know that when we are in a range, our buying probabilities basically come from the bottom of the range. Our selling probabilities come from the top of the range. Now we are at the top of the range currently. Would you want to sell into a market that has been pushing to the downside? We're at resistance, all that nice good stuff. Yes, you probably would, maybe because you're trading in the direction of the trend. Though, guys, what I do see happening here on Aussie CAD is obviously something beginning to form, a corrective structure. So within this corrective structure, we could obviously see maybe some manipulations to the upside and to the downside, just forming something a bit larger than we assume is forming. So going into next week, what I would love to look for on Aussie CAD is I would love to look for an opportunity to actually be able to be a buyer down low. Reason being is because we have taken out previous lower structure and prices have begun to impulse to the upside on the H4, showing us that there are some buyers that are interested in buying at these areas here where there could be some potential support. So we're seeing a lot of buying pressure, or a lot of buyers showing buying interest from a level of support. So we know that previous structure that had been broken on Aussie CAD were these previous lows up here. So from a probabilistic point of view, our selling probabilities will come from this resistance in these areas here, and our buying probabilities are now slightly higher than selling probabilities because we are at higher time frame support structures, or potential support on our higher time frames. So guys, I want to be looking to trade with the probabilities as well. So since we are at support, guys, I would be hoping for Aussie CAD to actually pull down lower, maybe even manipulate these lows and then break back within structure, then give me a test for a potential move to the upside. So on Aussie CAD, guys, I'm gonna be potentially bullish bias for now, and I would want to really be or focus on being a seller once prices actually tap into these resistance areas down there. I don't see a lot of selling probability coming in from these lows here, considering that prices have been pushing down for a while now. So we could be potentially, any push down from these areas here could potentially just be the last wave of this potential downtrend, and we don't want to be caught in the last wave, because the last wave is always followed by some sort of a larger corrective structure. So that might not give us the appropriate selling probabilities to get a good risk to reward ratio and an opportunity to maximize on our winning position if we want to trade against or with this long-term selling momentum that we see coming in there. So guys, looking at the probabilities, I would love to be buy biased at this point on AUDCAD, obviously looking for structure to give me a reason to buy in the form of either a corrective structure to the downside or prices maybe impulsing to the downside and then completing as a reversal structure or a larger reversal structure. Whatever the case is, guys, I'm going to be looking for some bullish bias structure, especially if prices do pull lower. If prices continue to push to the upside, I'll be less interested in being a buyer, and then I'll start observing structure to see how I can involve myself as a potential seller. So that's exactly what I'm looking for on AUDCAD, guys. Looking to be a buyer right now and then waiting for prices to tap into resistance to allow me an opportunity to enter with the momentum. So that's AUDCAD, guys. Let's go into Aussie Swiss franc. So on Aussie Swiss franc, guys, we can see, like I said, every week there is going to be analysis because we do these sessions, or we do host a live session on Saturday. So saves us some time to just use the same analysis that has been done from the Saturday's live session. So on Aussie Swiss franc, guys, what we do see here is a market long-term structure. Obviously, we have this impulse, this correction, and then looking at our most recent price action, we also see a slight impulse from these areas over here, followed by a corrective structure. Obviously, extreme highs over there, extreme lows over here, and prices have been playing within these extreme highs and these extreme lows ever since. We did see markets actually poking below these previous extreme lows over there, obviously breaking back within structure, as we can see. That shows us that obviously liquidity was grabbed within these structural lows. So on Aussie Swiss franc, guys, I'm hoping for some potential upside. Looking at the current structure, obviously you guys can see extreme highs over there and extreme lows over here, and price is within those extreme highs and those extreme lows. So we could assume this is either a redistribution or gonna be an accumulation for some higher prices. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. I'm looking for an accumulation. Obviously, I want to be a buyer as low as I can be. So if prices do pull down to the low of this structure, I'm going to be paying attention to how prices are moving to the downside, and as well as what are prices doing when they get into the area that I'm looking to start being a buyer from. So I'm gonna hope for prices to actually pull down lower. If prices do push up higher, I'm gonna be paying attention to any breaks and retests that really give me a higher probability than the kind of probabilities that normally would present themselves at this stage. I really want to involve myself as a buyer as low as I can. If prices do push up higher, I'll obviously have less probabilities and a slightly smaller risk to reward ratio, so I might not be so interested, just depending on the type of price action that does develop. But nonetheless, I am looking for a bullish bias structure to kind of form in these areas to give me a reason to actually buy this market, to kind of buy into this momentum over here, and as well as our higher time frame momentum that we saw coming in over there. Target areas on Aussie Swiss franc would be these extreme highs up here, and then maybe if prices do continue to impulse to the upside, we might find some continuation for maybe extended targets up to these extreme highs up here. I probably wouldn't want to target any bullish bias or any bullish setups above those previous structural highs there, just because I'm looking at longer time frame structure as well, and I can see that we have been overextended to the upside, and this could just be the potential final up waves of maybe a larger corrective structure for a potential move to the downside. So, but anyway, that's very far in the future. Let's just focus on what's happening right now on Aussie Swiss franc. I'm going to be looking for some potential upside to kind of complete at these areas here, but if we do push higher, let's see if we can ride any AUD strength that might show up in the few weeks to follow. So let's go on to AUDJPY, guys. On Aussie yen, guys, structure looks quite similar, I guess, just a different change because we deleted this resistance trend line up here, and we really just wanted to look at the most recent price action to see what's cooking there. Obviously, paying attention to the fact that we are at a potential resistance area up here. We can see that we've extended that from those extreme highs up there. But nonetheless, looking at the corrective nature of this structure, we do see highs over here, highs obviously being violated to the upside and prices breaking back within structure, indicating that this is a corrective move to the upside. Prices are violating structural highs, but buyers are not able to keep structures above previous areas where sellers showed interest. So obviously showing us some buying momentum, but not decisive buying happening on AUDJPY. So looking at the nature of the structure, guys, we do see a potential 3 touch. First touch there, second touch over here, and we are at the potential third touch of this market. Now looking at things from a higher time frame perspective, and as well as looking at the momentum, we do see a lot of selling momentum coming out of there. And ever since we have created these extreme lows here, we've been playing within these extreme highs and these extreme lows, obviously creating a corrective structure, pushing prices to the upside. So just nature of the market, guys, we expect impulse correction, potential impulse to the downside. So whether or not AUDJPY actually violates our structural highs in these areas over here and maybe even create new highs, I'm still going to be bearish bias, obviously expecting some sort of a manipulation above structure and then structure to kind of give us a bearish looking structure for us to be able to trade, because we are at resistance, guys. I wouldn't be looking to buy at a potential resistance. And as well as looking at the past, how we've seen a lot of sellers just jumping into AUDJPY when prices were extreme highs and then those corrective pushes to the upside. There's definitely momentum to the downside, and if that momentum is going to come into play sometime in the near future, I want to be involved, because that's going to give me the opportunity to maximize on this winning trade. By being involved in the momentum, guys, we obviously get to targets a lot faster, and prices give us a lot more of those clearer continuation structures to be able to scale in and maximize on any long-term potential downside that a market might present to us. So on AUDJPY, guys, I'm just basically going to be waiting for a reversal structure. Remember, if markets impulse to an area where we're looking to be a seller, then we wait for all of these buyers that were showing a lot of interest to exit the market. How do we see that they've exited the market? By the formation of a reversal structure. Once the reversal structure forms and once we see breaks of structure to the downside, then we understand that these buyers have not been able to hold prices above levels of structure that the market has created, and we see prices breaking down and sellers being able to hold structure to the downside. So once we see something like that happening on AUDJPY, I'm definitely going to want to involve myself on the sell side of things. So that's all I'm looking for on AUDJPY: reversal structure within these areas here, and then some potential downside. Let's go on to NZDCAD. Now, amazing that I have AUDCAD and NZDCAD, because our biases are going to be a lot similar just because of the correlation with the CAD as the quote pair. But also these pairs move in their own unique ways, so they're going to require us to obviously approach them in or with slightly different kind of open-mindedness. Yeah, let's just put it that way. So on Aussie CAD, what we can see is extreme lows over there. Obviously prices have not violated those extreme lows, but we do see these lows over here being violated. They are equal lows. If we just look at the structure, we see a low there, we see another test of that area, and then we see a push to the upside, violating structural highs. So nice important equal lows that were violated to the downside, and prices have broken back within the structure. Once we see prices not able to hold structure well, we obviously expect some sort of a corrective structure or corrective price action nature. So looking at NZDCAD, we do see that we have, let's just zoom in a bit so that we can pay attention to the H4 and also look at the most recent price action. What we do see here on NZDCAD is obviously a market that has extreme lows down there, extreme highs up here, and then we've just seen these highs and lows just being manipulated to the upside, basically in some sort of a ranging manner or consolidation type of a thing. So we do know that our selling probabilities, if we look at the previous support structure that was broken in this potential downtrend, we do know that these are our next resistance areas. We can see that they were tested again there in the past. So quite an important resistance area to want to look for those selling probabilities to actually come into play. Now looking at where we are right now, we are at the lows of these or of this move to the downside at some potential support. So obviously we want to be looking to trade with the probabilities as well. So looking to be a buyer down low would make a lot more sense than looking to sell into this trade, because you would have to manage your position by the time we get to these extreme lows and these extreme lows down there. So if you were to be a seller at this point, you wouldn't have a lot of risk to reward ratio if you're swinging looking at some higher time frame momentum. Otherwise, if you were to be a buyer by the time prices came into this area, you would have a lot of risk to reward and I guess the probabilities as well, because the next resistance area that you understand is an important resistance area would be these areas here, and so you'd have to maybe partial out halfway through your position and then manage your full position by the time prices get there. So what I would be hoping for on NZDCAD, same as Aussie CAD, guys, if prices do push lower, I'd be looking for an opportunity to actually jump into the market with a buying opportunity. So my buying probabilities are in play right now at this point if prices do pull lower. Otherwise, guys, what I was saying to the guys in the live session is that we can expect prices to kind of create equal highs, take them out, create more equal highs, maybe convince sellers to jump in early and then take out those new equal highs, obviously generating the liquidity that's necessary for these markets to make some long-term downside. So what I will be looking for on NZDCAD, just opening my mind to where my probabilities are at. I really want to be a seller when prices actually pull into these areas here. I would hope that prices correct into these areas because that would give me a lot more confidence on taking a risk entry, obviously being able to maximize on my rewards with a risk entry. So if prices do correct, if the nature of price action is corrective to the upside, then I would love that because it would give me an opportunity to trade in the direction of some higher time frame momentum that we've seen come in long term over there. And also in the recent past, we've seen some sell side momentum that has been able to actually violate some lower structure on our left hand side. So a lot of selling interest, and I would love to trade in the direction of that selling interest, but my selling probabilities will be maximized when prices do get into these resistance areas, guys. So we always want to understand where we are in the market, where our probabilities are on both sides, decide whether we want to be a buyer or a seller based off the structure that we see, and then understand where our probabilities long term will come in, whether we decide to be a buyer or a seller. So I would love to be a buyer right now, but I understand where my buying probabilities will come in, and I also understand what it means for me, what the probabilities are of me trading within this range. So looking to obviously trade the bottom of the range for those buying opportunities and not the top of the range, even though I know that I can still buy this market until we get into these areas here. So looking to be a buyer down low on NZDCAD, and then looking to be a seller up high to join the higher time frame momentum that we do see coming in on our left hand side. Also the neckline of a potential crooked looking head and shoulder structure, but nonetheless we do see a support structure that has been tested not once but twice, prices breaking through, and then could be respected as resistance for some long-term downside continuation. So that's what I'd love to see in NZDCAD, guys. Let's go into the last pair that we're going to have a look at for today, and that's NZDJPY. So guys, on NZDJPY, very similar looking structure to I guess AUDJPY. Kind of, yeah, very similar setup, and I'd love to take NZDJPY I guess more than AUDJPY, just because NZDJPY still has some room to complete for a third touch. There's still a lot of room for prices to fake sell moves early, and then obviously grab that liquidity and then have the long-term nice selling momentum. So the structure looks a lot more clear to me on NZDJPY than it does on AUDJPY. So I'm going to be taking the setup that presents itself to me more clearly, or the setup that will give me the higher probabilities. Remember, AUDJPY, we said that prices still have to reverse. NZDJPY, prices can still play around and then give us a risk entry, guys, because they still have a lot more room to push to the upside. So what I would be looking for, guys, we're obviously just looking at structure quickly before we digress too far. We have extreme highs over there, prices not being able to break above those extreme highs, but obviously prices now coming in, testing those extreme highs again, still not breaking above those extreme highs, and prices playing again at those extreme highs. So we definitely see that prices want to generate as much liquidity up below those swing highs just to take it out in the near future. So I'm definitely expecting NZDJPY to kind of take that sell side liquidity out one more time. Once we get this one push to the upside above those these previous swing highs here, that's where I'll be interested in beginning to look for my trend reversals. So I'll obviously be looking at my lower time frames to spot the reversal in trend, and then once I see something like that, obviously looking for bearish bias structure to form within these areas to actually give me a reason to sell this market regardless of how they form. I'm just going to be looking for bearish bias structure because we are at resistance, we are at higher time frame resistance where prices could even just manipulate to the upside, break back within structure, and then we see all of this long-term momentum that we've seen coming in there, followed by this corrective structure just following through to the downside. So I want to be involved in long-term higher time frame momentum, and we do see the potential for NZDJPY to make that push to the downside, obviously grabbing all of the liquidity below all of these equal lows that have been formed on this potential, on this trend, or on the way to the upside. So we know that when markets move and grab liquidity, especially a lot of liquidity like this, they move very fast. That's why we have these impulse corrections and impulse. The reasons why markets correct like this is to fill potential imbalances that might have been left behind by previous impulsive structures. So everything works out in the market. The market is always balancing itself. It always makes sense. It's always going to look for areas of balance, and if those areas of balance exist below these lows over here, obviously the market is going to want to move to the downside, and I want to be involved in that potential move. So looking at things from a higher time frame perspective, guys, a lot of drawings on NZDJPY. We have seen markets basically correcting to the upside. You can call this a trend, but looking at the most recent momentum that's been coming in right now, we do see a lot of sellers being interested at selling at these extreme high prices. So I want to be involved when these sellers decide that they want to sell NZDJPY as aggressively as we've seen them sell before. So looking for that reversal structure, guys, obviously looking for some downside, waiting for structures to obviously trend to the downside, giving me a reason to enter. My network disappeared, guys, but nonetheless, if prices do correct to the upside, then I will be interested in taking that risk entry. Though if prices do continue maybe to impulse to the upside, then I will be waiting for prices to actually reverse first, and then I'll be looking for a reduced risk entry. So nonetheless, looking for those selling opportunities on NZDJPY, hoping to trade the higher time frame momentum, guys. Now that is the end of the analysis. I hope that you guys, first of all, got value from this analysis. I hope that you guys have seen the concepts that I use, the ideas of correlation and the ideas of structure, looking at highs, looking at lows, looking at where we are within the structure, looking at where our probabilities are, understanding that if I want to be a buyer, where should I be looking for those probability buys, those high probability buys, and if I want to be a seller, where should I be looking for those high probability sells. And that's the kind of content that I would love to give to you guys. I want to give you guys something that you can use in the future, not something that's specific to just next week, like the next trading opportunity. That's not the reason of this analysis. The analysis is to show you guys the concepts that I use so that you can use them on your own on the different assets that you trade. Trading is subjective. All of these things that I'm saying, all the concepts that I'm using, you can use them in your own way that makes that makes you comfortable, that makes you feel more confident, and obviously that's also easy for you to understand. People understand different things on a different wavelength, and maybe trading trend lines will make a lot more sense to you, and you'll be able to identify trends a lot more easy. And maybe for someone else, spotting horizontal resistance and support might make a trend a lot more obvious for them. So the reason why we go over all of these different concepts and show you guys how they all say the exact same thing is so that you can pick out what works for you, what you feel comfortable, what's easy for your eyes to see, and then you work on your strengths, what's not working for you, what you're finding difficult. Leave those behind and then focus on your strengths. So guys, I guess this is the end of the analysis. Let's not drag it too long. Hope you guys enjoyed the analysis. Obviously drop a like if you have received some sort of value, and subscribe if you're here for the first time. Otherwise, if you're part of the family, part of the ones that return every week, thanks for being here. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate the time that you take to spend watching these videos. Otherwise, guys, this is T.Mayne. I'll see you guys in the future analysis. Take care. Consistency starts here. Consistency starts with the small things, guys. Enjoy the rest of your guys' trading week and have a profitable week.